Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for August the 11th, 2021. As usual, we'll start with the demo, and today we're passing off to Kevin Hoffman for his work around Jet. Kevin?
Yeah, sorry, I just was having trouble finding finding the right window here. Let's see. So yeah, it looks like Steve put a link to the ADR, the architectural decision record for using Jetstream. I guess, but before I get into the quote unquote demo here, just a couple of quick words on it. I just wanted to mention that Jetstream is essentially a subproduct of Nets. When you run it, it comes built into the Net server. So all you really have to do in order to enable Jetstream is just pass the -js flag to a NAT server, and you're good to go. And so what the ADR mentions is that we've essentially decided to use Jetstream as the means for us storing all of the metadata that needs to be stored about and in a lattice. So let's see if I can share. So I can share a screen here.
He's already co-host. Don't look at me.
All right. So we can see my terminal window here.
Yep.
Looks great. And you can see all three boxes.
Yep.
Okay. So in the bottom box, just so that we know there's nothing up my sleeves. Basically, this is just, as you can see, it's just NAT server running with the -js option. And what the wasmCloud host does is when you start it up, it will create a stream within Jetstream, and we use that stream to store all of our cache data. And you can use the NATS tool to take a look at the list of streams. And so you can see that I've got one called lattice cache default, and that default actually corresponds to the lattice prefix. So if you're running multiple lattices on the same infrastructure in multi-tenant mode, where each lattice has its own prefix, each lattice will also get its own completely independent stream. And that actually lets you, among other things, have different configurations for different lattices. So you could have an in-memory stream for one lattice and one persisted on disk with 3 cluster members in a different stream. So you can also use the NATS tool to get information on a particular stream. So in this case, you can see we're using a subject called lc.default, and then the NATS multi-level wildcard character there. Yeah, and essentially the trick we're using here is involves around the use of maximum messages per subject, in which case ours is limited to 1. And so essentially each message on each subject is a cached bit of information that we emitted. So think of these as immutable events, and whenever an event takes place that corresponds to state that needs to change within the lattice cache, we emit that to one of the streams, or to one of the topics on the stream. And I believe let's see. Right, so I can also use the NATS tool to view the contents of a stream. So what you'll see here is I'm having trouble here. There we go. So I'll scroll through here, and you can basically just see that I've got a pile of messages in here that are sitting in the stream. And these messages are actually the sum total of messages emitted during one of our integration tests. So what's really cool here is I can fire up one of our hosts, And because this stream is up and running, what you'll see in a few seconds is this big stream of cache messages. So we created what's called an ephemeral consumer for the Lattice cache, and that in Jetstream terms, that means that the consumer is alive as long as the host process is. And then when the host process dies, the consumer dies as well. And, you know, like I said, this isn't really all that much of a fancy demo other than to show you that I can bring hosts up and down and have the hosts automatically reconstitute their cache status from NATs. One of the main reasons why we chose NATs for this is we already use NATs as our core messaging infrastructure, so it's already a requirement for wasmCloud. And since Jetstream essentially comes with NATs for free, it seemed kind of like a no-brainer for us to use this. And I strongly encourage anybody who's interested in it to go check out the Jetstream documentation. It's the URL for that is actually down here in the bottom box. It's docs.nats.io/Jetstream. There's a ton of stuff that you can do with Jetstream that we're not even coming close to scratching the surface of. So definitely recommend people play around with that. And, you know, just to prove that we've actually cached, we've cached all of these things. Yeah, see, these are the cached claims. So everything that has a JSON Web Token within the lattice emits a set of claims to the cache, so we can tell who issued it, what the name is, and what the public key of the entity is. And by having that that information in the cache, that essentially allows us to do all of our security checks and our validity checks and things like that before facilitating remote procedure calls between actors and providers and so on. So, you know, again, just to show, you know, I can fire this up and, you know, I downloaded the cache. So certainly not the most exciting demo, but from an enablement standpoint, the types of things that this now enables us to do is pretty impressive. And it makes it so that we can go from easily running on your workstation to easily running in an enterprise in full compliance mode with essentially with no changes to the code.
Kevin, quick question. Did you show how to start NATs with Jetstream enabled? How difficult that is?
Yeah, it's not difficult at all. You just start it with -JS and you get Jetstream enabled for free. And like I said, if you allow the wasmCloud host to create the stream for you, you essentially get an in-memory stream. So if I were to bounce this NAT server, I would essentially lose the cache. But what you can do is before you start any hosts, you can create the stream yourself, and we'll have some documentation on how to create that up on our website once we get the first release of the OTP version. But you can create it yourself and configure it with disk-based persistence. You can set the number of replicas for the stream for anything from, I believe the options are 1, 3, or 5. So, you know, in a large enterprise cluster, you could set up this stream so that there are 5 disk-based replicas running around in your cluster. And, you know, the documentation goes into this as well, but you can mix and match so that you can have a lattice that has, let's say, 5 NAT servers that are running Jetstream, you could also have 10 more of them in that same cluster that are not running Jetstream, and everything still magically works. So that was it for the so-called demo.
Kevin, I feel like there's a ton of other use cases that people might have for building their own apps where they might leverage Jetstream. Does this show up now as some sort of a capability provider, or something that people can leverage in their own development work?
There's no capability provider that is specific to NAT's Jetstream. The NAT's message broker based capability provider, by virtue of sitting on top of NATS, is essentially compatible with Jetstream. We don't have a capability provider that does things like create ephemeral consumers and things like that. Again, Jetstream hasn't really been part of the NAT server for very long, so it hasn't been out that very long, but I would definitely love to hear people's thoughts on, how they see features like NAT's Jetstream and other ones like Kafka fitting into different capability providers. We have an event streams provider as well. So I can see use cases where it might make sense to have a Jetstream based event stream provider that is more specific to that particular type of use case rather than using the generic NATS provider. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of untapped opportunity there. We just haven't dug into it yet.
Okay, super interesting. Sorry, Steve.
I was just going to ask Kevin. The NATS server that the wasmCloud host immediately connects to itself doesn't have to be running Jetstream, right? At least as long as at least one of them in the cluster is, right? Is that right?
That's correct. So one thing that I was playing with earlier this morning in kind of a mad scientist scenario was you start a wasmCloud host pointing it to a leaf node, which is, I imagine that being very common, if not a best practice in large enterprise situations, where you point it at a leaf node and then the leaf node has its connection information pointing off to some other NATS server or NATS cluster. And what I had set up was a leaf node pointing to the machine behind me, and then the machine behind me was connected to yet another machine, and I had the NATS Jetstream server running essentially 2 hops away. And to your point, the only requirement is that the topic space be visible from one client to another, and that's really the only thing that matters. So as long as you've stitched together your NATS infrastructure so that you haven't blocked the special Jetstream topic space, everything works.
Yeah, great. That's amazing. Brilliant. Really good.
Awesome work, Kevin. Any other questions for Kevin? And Stuart, my apologies. I thought that was Steve starting to chime in. I didn't mean to mix up the names there. Any other questions for Kevin? Great. Well, as always, just more exciting features continue to stack up around the OTP release. And I know it's going to be a lot of fun to play with. Were there any other demos that we wanted to do today? I know we had a couple that were, considered for this afternoon. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on into the agenda for today. Just a quick call out, the CFP for WASM Day for KubeCon NA has completed. We have well over 20 submissions. So I look forward to getting some reviews in there, and I know a couple people on the call submitted. Thank you so much for those. Kevin still has his Linux Foundation stuff up, and this week we have another WASM time meeting tomorrow for anyone that's interested in attending. There's a link in the notes linked from the calendar invite. I guess Steve, maybe I know you did an update into Slack this week on the sprint from last week, sort of a quick retro. Is there anything that you'd want to highlight out as far as things accomplished or priorities that we're working through this week?
Sure. So the Jetstream stuff is real exciting for this week. We're still on track for this week's goals to get WASH merged with OTP and to have some sample code for actors and capability providers up there on GitHub. So I would love to have people start playing with it. I'll send out a note on Slack general channel when that's up, and love to hear people's experience with that. And Jetstream is now in the main branch for the OTP host, so that'll be ready to play with the actors and providers.
Okay, that's awesome. Any questions about the updates, either what was posted in Slack or anything that Steve just shared? Any questions about priorities or what's on the roadmap here? Okay, is it worth pulling up the board, Brooks or Steve, the ZenHub board, and just doing a visual review on anything that's in there, or do we feel like the update out there kind of covers that?
I guess it's up to Steve if he wants to share it. I think he's got a good handle on like all the work that happened over the sprint.
Yeah, I'm happy to share the board. I don't know if I think it's less informative than the text description because it takes a lot of scrolling in a few seconds to get your head around what's on the screen. So I guess I would put it back to, does anybody have any questions or want more information or more insight? And then we could go from there.
I think it sounds like folks are okay with what was posted in chat. So I would say let's not spend the time. I guess to open up the floor. Stuart, I think David and Kevin have been chatting through a couple of OTP related things. Is there anything worth you guys discussing now live that you guys would want to talk through? I know that we were talking through some potential timeout issues on NATs and getting those options surfaced in the product.
Yeah, David unfortunately can't make it today, but we have been talking, and we'd really love to start working on some form of lattice controller as per our or lattice operator, I guess maybe you call it, as per our conversation with Kevin in Slack. I think we wouldn't be able to start working on it for a couple of weeks, but we do have time after that to spend like the next 6 weeks or so, or maybe a month working on it. And we work closely with it feels like to me Elixir would be a good thing to do it in, but we're all Elixir noobs, so I don't know. Rust we're more familiar or more comfortable with Rust, but I think Elixir might be the right thing. So I don't know what your opinion is on that, Kevin.
Yeah, I go back and forth at least 20-30 times a day trying to figure out where I think this should land.
Yeah.
So far, I think the most compelling case for this comes up being something like OTP, where it just feels like some of the concurrent stream processing stuff that you get out of the box
Mm,
with OTP feels like it will just be a smooth fit for consuming a bunch of deltas that are received over NATs and materializing that into this observed state structure.
Yeah.
And
I,
then
I'm
running some timers and things like that to periodically determine what imperatives need to be emitted in order to convert the observed state to the desired state. That also feels like something that OTP will do fairly easily out of the box. I feel like I haven't obviously experimented with it, but a lot of the concurrent nature of what needs to be done feels like it would be head against desk Rust stuff, and maybe a little bit more of an easy fit in Elixir.
I agree with you. I was coming to the same conclusion. It feels like supervised processes is the way to go with this, because it needs to be resilient and stay up. And I can imagine spawning processes to do specific things, like you say, in parallel, to gradually nudge the reality to the desired on a loop. I think it sounds like exactly the right thing to do in Elixir. I was thinking we can push it out there and do it in Gleam or something. I know you've been talking to Louis. I'm not serious about this, but we've been talking with Louis Pilfold, who actually incidentally used to work at Red Badger for a couple of years. He has done a great job so far, I think, with strongly typed Elixir or Gleam or whatever. But
Yeah,
I think Elixir is the right thing.
Yeah, Gleam is it's definitely on my list of things I wish I had more time to play with. Just the very idea of a rusty Elixir or a strongly typed Elixir is very, very tempting.
It is. Maybe I'll hook up with him, but I think we should stick with one thing. Elixir is the right thing.
I had started a Gleam project that was where I had actually started building a WebAssembly parser in Gleam, and it was surprisingly fun until I just ran out of time. I haven't gone back to it yet. I called it Gleasm for Gleam.
Gleasm. Catchy.
Yeah, I think I love the discussion that we're already into the how we would accomplish this, but I want to know if we should take a step back and maybe talk about the what we should do first. And I love that we've got multiple stakeholders here that are maybe interested in collaborating or committing. And this is a question, I think, for Kevin and Stuart here. Do we feel that the way, we're not doing real, like PRDs, product requirement documentations for like detailed planning. And I'm not suggesting that we need to. Do we feel that the way that we've been putting out an RFC on GitHub and then inviting comments, is that enough of a process here for us to align on the what we are trying to accomplish together before we get into the how we're going to do it? What is your feedback, Stuart? I think you followed along with a couple of the bigger ones we've done. And Kevin, I know you've driven most of many of the biggest RFCs that we've done. And Steve and Brooks, you guys as well. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Is this a time where we might want to maybe plan a little bit more, because I could see this being important to the Crustlet folks represented by Microsoft and Matt, some of the Red Badger team, and obviously the wasmCloud and Cosmonic communities as well.
I think that sounds like a great way to do it, and we should at least do that, right? And Kevin, your thoughts already. We should transcribe those into an RFC of some sort so that we can discuss it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like the RFC approach. Some of the RFCs have been they felt kind of like yelling into the void. you know, the RFCs are only as good as the number of or as the amount of comments they get. You know, the more people who comment on an RFC, the more useful that thing is. You know, there's still some real value in just converting raw thought into a formal paper like that. It always helps clear things up. But yeah, I would definitely love to get a bunch of feedback on this. So I think I'll take it on as a to-do list item for myself to create sort of a starter RFC to talk about the work that we want to do, and like Stuart said, you know, transcribe some of the thoughts that I've already got on it, and then we can go from there.
That would be great. And I mean, we haven't got any bandwidth for the next couple of weeks anyway, so we can use that time to evolve the discussion around it, and we'll get to a point where we all feel comfortable that we can start something, and even if it's only a spike to start with, just to see what it looks like.
That's super, right? Because I think this is you know, this, if it's going to manifest itself as some sort of a you know, wasmCloud lattice controller that we're going to nest behind a CRD. I love the idea that this is portable and has use cases independent of the implementation that we're going to use to drive that. Is that my high level understanding? Yeah, Kevin and Stuart, you know, kind of align there. Is that a good TLDR for how we're thinking about this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, super. Well, Kevin, as always, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I did kind of want to mention, and I'll probably put this in the RFC as well, is that, you know, having learned what I've learned so far about Jetstream, using it for essentially the lattice distributed cache, I think it also makes for potentially a really good place to store the list of desired states as essentially as a deployment store. You know, that kind of stuff, Kubernetes already has a way of storing that stuff in distributed fashion, but being able to put that into essentially a Jetstream stream means that we would now have a durable, replicable, resilient store for deployments, rather than just relying on, you know, like a singleton process or something. Just throwing that out there.
Great idea.
Awesome. Well, I think getting all this pulled together as a quick, you know, RFC and then driving the discussion it was an awesome way for us to do this. And Matt Fisher, I'd love to do a call out to Taylor and the team to chime in on this one, because I could see this being something that maybe has some bearing on Crustlet, and maybe not, you know, because this is sort of is specific to our you know, application runtime there, but maybe because I think we've accomplished a lot together, you know, in helping to push WebAssembly forward into cloud native in general. And Stuart, is this something that you think could, if you guys were to speak at WASM Day, is this a feature that, you know, you guys think that may be demonstratable in your talk, or is that maybe a stretch goal at this time, too far out?
I would love it to be, and if we could get to that point before then, that would be an amazing thing to show. I think the demos that we've got, the POC that we've got worked up already, is a good demo in its own right. So I mean, I think there's enough there anyway if we don't get that far, but it would be great to add that, like GitOpsy, idempotent kind of way of deploying workloads would be amazing. To your point earlier, I think yeah, we discussed that potentially both WASH and a Kubernetes operator or any other mechanism would forward manifest onto this operator. So I mean, it could be an amazing thing to demo.
Well, I think it also gives us a bunch of other opportunities here, because I see a ton of innovation where people are like, I see a ton of people innovating around the whole CRD space in Kubernetes land. There's startups that are doing like, almost like Helm type functionality and, building UIs and all kinds of stuff like that. So I really look forward to this particular piece of work because I think that this is our bridge to where our customers are today, and where we want to take them is giving them more tooling and accessibility now is a huge uplift. Great. Well, let's maybe slide on down the agenda and we'll put a pin in this one for now, or we could come back to it and spend time on this now if we wanted to talk through it. Are there any other feature sets that we feel like we should raise today or that we'd want to talk? Okay, any other open topics or community news anyone else wants to bring up this afternoon? Okay, well, I think that puts a bow on our meeting for today. I'll go and stop recording, and as usual, we can hang out and just to chat a bit. Cheers.